The moment the tiny device hit the marble floor, the entire world seemed to pause, because sometimes the smallest things carry the loudest truths. In a glass-walled corporate lobby where power walked in tailored suits and silence was bought with money, a hearing aid slipped from a young girl's ear and skidded across the polished ground. No one noticed. No one stopped. No one cared, except a small hand reaching down from the lowest place in the room. And in that simple, almost invisible act, two very different lives were about to collide in a way that would change them forever. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a moment right now, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small actions. To like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The lobby belonged to Whitmore Global, one of the most powerful corporations in the United States. Its walls were lined with awards, its floors reflected success, and its people moved quickly, as if time itself worked for them. Daniel Brooks stood near the entrance, gripping a worn folder with both hands, trying not to look out of place. His jacket was clean but old, his shoes polished but thin at the soles. Beside him stood his daughter Lily, small and quiet, her fingers curled tightly around the strap of her faded backpack. Daniel was a single father, a man who had learned to measure life in sacrifices, extra shifts, sleepless nights, skipped meals, ever since Lily's mother had passed away years earlier. Lily had learned to be quiet not because she lacked words, but because she had learned early that the world didn't always listen. They were there for a job interview, custodial services, third shift. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep the lights on in Lily in school. Daniel had brought Lily because the babysitter had canceled, and he couldn't afford another. He kept apologizing to her in whispers, though she never complained. Lily had a gentle way of observing the world, her eyes catching details others missed. She noticed kindness. She noticed pain. She noticed things that fell through the cracks. Across the lobby, escorted by two assistants, walked Emily Whitmore, the CEO's only daughter. She was around Lily's age, dressed in a soft blue coat that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Emily was brilliant, kind, and partially deaf, a condition she'd had since birth. Her hearing aid was small, nearly invisible, but it was her lifeline to a world that often forgot to slow down. Her father, Richard Whitmore, had given her everything money could buy, but he couldn't protect her from feeling different, from feeling unseen in rooms full of people who talked over her rather than to her. As Emily walked, distracted by the echoing noise of the lobby and the assistants rushing her along, her hearing aid loosened and fell. It made no sound loud enough for anyone to notice. Shoes stepped past it. Briefcases rolled over the space beside it. No one looked down. No one bent to help. Except Lily. She had seen the small object fall. She had watched it slide across the floor and stop near her shoe. Without hesitation, Lily knelt down, picked it up carefully, and walked toward Emily. She tugged gently at her father's sleeve, pointing. Daniel followed her gaze, his heart tightening as he realized Lily was approaching the CEO's daughter, surrounded by authority and wealth that made him feel invisible. Lily reached up, her small hand extended, her eyes kind and steady. She tapped Emily's coat lightly and offered the hearing aid with a shy smile. Emily froze, confusion washing over her face until she recognized the object in Lily's hand. Relief followed instantly, then something deeper, gratitude mixed with surprise. In a world where people often avoided her difference, here was a child who noticed, who cared, who acted. Time seemed to slow as Emily accepted the hearing aid, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at Lily, really looked at her, and smiled back. It was a smile that reached her eyes, a smile that said, "Thank you," without needing words. The assistants finally noticed, their expressions shifting from impatience to discomfort. They murmured apologies, but the moment had already carved itself into the space between the two girls. From across the lobby, Richard Whitmore had been watching. A man used to control, to strategy, to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. He felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. He had seen his daughter struggle her entire life, not because of her hearing loss, but because of how people reacted to it. And now a little girl with worn shoes and a faded backpack had done what no polished executive had bothered to do. She had seen Emily. Richard approached Daniel and Lily, his presence commanding silence. Daniel straightened instinctively, fear creeping into his chest, unsure if his daughter had done something wrong. Years of being judged for being poor had taught him to expect blame before praise. But Richard's voice when he spoke was quiet and controlled, carrying something rare, emotion. He thanked Lily, then Daniel. Daniel tried to respond, but his words caught in his throat. He wasn't used to gratitude from men like this. He wasn't used to being noticed at all. Richard asked why they were there, and Daniel explained, his voice steady but humble. He spoke of needing work, of wanting stability for his daughter, of doing whatever it took to give her a future. Something shifted in Richard that day. Not pity, respect. Over the following weeks, Daniel got the job. Then another opportunity followed. Day shifts, better pay, benefits. Lily was enrolled in a private school through a scholarship funded quietly by the Whitmore Foundation. Emily and Lily became friends, their bond growing through shared silence, shared laughter, shared understanding. They communicated not just with words, but with patience, with presence. Emily taught Lily simple sign language, and Lily taught Emily how to find joy in the smallest things. Daniel watched his daughter blossom, watched her confidence grow as the world finally made space for her kindness. He worked hard, learned new skills, and slowly climbed out of survival mode. But what moved him most wasn't the change in their circumstances. It was the reminder that goodness still mattered, that the smallest acts could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. Richard Whitmore changed too. He started walking the halls instead of rushing through them. He looked people in the eye. He listened more. He funded programs not because they looked good on paper, but because they changed lives. All because one day a little girl had bent down when everyone else walked past. Life didn't become perfect. There were still struggles, late nights, doubts. But there was also hope. And hope, Daniel learned, was enough to keep going. Now, before this story reaches its final moments, I want to ask you something deeply from the heart. Please comment below with just one word: kindness. Let it be a reminder that even today, in a fast and noisy world, kindness still matters. Years later, Lily would barely remember the fear of that lobby, but she would always remember the feeling of helping someone without expecting anything back. Emily would grow into a confident young woman who advocated for accessibility and inclusion. And Daniel would tell this story not as a miracle of luck, but as proof that character is revealed in moments no one is watching. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of small actions and quiet goodness, please take a moment now to like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps spread stories that remind us who we can be when we choose compassion over indifference. Because sometimes the world doesn't change with grand gestures or loud words, but with a small hand reaching down and a heart brave enough to care.